Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, Daber Aaron v'al banav lemor, koi tevarchu et bnei Yisrael lemor lehem. And it says like this. This is a way that you should bless the Jewish people. So, a few things over here. First of all, Rabbeinu Bachai says something very beautiful. Rabbeinu Bachai's very early commentary. He says, Ko tevarechu. The word ko, if you take a look 3 lines up from the bottom, third word in. Kof hey. Chof in Gematria is 20, and hey in Gematria is 5. Now, I don't know if you know this, but first of all, 20 and 5 together is 25. Right. Don't look at me like that. This is what I heard from my Rebbes. I don't know if this is true or not.
Let me get out the calculator.
Maybe it's 52. I don't know, but whatever. It's 25, and there are 24 priestly gifts that are given. And when people bring their sacrifices to the temple, so there are 24 different things that are given over to the priests that belong to them. So Rabbeinu Bachai says something very beautiful over. He says, Ko tevarchu. Using the word 25, or the word ko, using the gematria of 25, he says there are 24 priestly gifts, but the biggest gift of all is the ability to bless the Jewish people. It's a very, very beautiful idea. You go to shul, if you go to shul ever, if you go here in Israel, they have it every single day, right? In Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel. So in most communities, it's only on festivals, and it's a big deal. I remember as kids we used to wait for this. It was like, it was exciting to watch the Kohanim go up and then, hear them blessing everybody. It was a big thing. Nowadays, you get it every single day over here. Some Sephardic communities, they bless either only on Shabbat or they bless every single day, even outside of Israel as well. But that's the idea. Kol tevarechu, the biggest blessing of all is to be able to bless the Jewish people, which is a very beautiful idea. However, if you read through the verse very carefully, you'll see that it doesn't actually say when. It just says, Dabel Aaron v'al banav lemor, Ko tevarechu es bnei Yisrael lemor lehem. This is the way that you're supposed to bless them. In a minute, we'll look at the blessing itself.
What kind of gifts do they bring besides the?
All the bits and the pieces. So the Kohen would get some of this sacrifice, a part of that sacrifice. He'd get the skin from this.
From the
right?
korbanos.
Yeah. But if you read the verse, you'll see that God doesn't actually say when to bless the Jewish people, which sounds a bit strange. You would have thought that if God's already giving He's already giving this instruction that the Jewish people have to be blessed, so you would imagine that He would tell them when to bless as well. So I saw a very beautiful idea that the Kohanim don't have to be told that they are so. It's an innate part of who they are that they want to bless. They don't have to be told when to bless. They just have to be told how to do it properly. Some people have to be told when to bless as well, because it's not really an innate part of who they are, wanting to bless other people. But by the Kohanim, they're so full of love for the Jewish people that they want to bless them anyway. And if that's the case, so they don't have to be told when to do it. And what do? So we've got over here 3 different verses. And if you count them up, we've got 3 different. The first verse has got 3 words in it, the second verse has got 5 words in it, and the third verse has got 7 words in it. And if you put that all together, we get to 5, 3 plus 5,
8
plus 7,
15.
15, right? 15, of course, is the first 2 letters of God's 4-letter name. The Yud and the Hey. Yud is 10, Hey is 5, which means that contained inside of this bracha is the most incredible, encapsulated, concentrated version of what it is that God wants to give us. Inside of these 3 verses is everything we could possibly want. So let's have a look and see. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, that's verse number 24. No, it's not, it's verse number 25, I'm sorry. Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, which is what? That God should bless us and look after us. So explain the commentaries, what is this referring to? It's referring to the blessing of physicality. That God should give us material abundance, that we should have whatever we need. In that way, we won't be, we won't be distracted in our what's called in our avodat Hashem, in the way that we worship God. We'll be able to dedicate our time properly to be able to draw closer to God, and we'll be blessed with physical abundance. Yo'eh Hashem panav elecha v'yichuneka, which is the next blessing. What is that? That's a blessing of spirituality. Anything that's got light in it normally denotes some kind of a spiritual dimension. So Yah Hashem panav elecha v'yichuneka, that God should bring His He should shine His countenance upon us. He should show us His light. That's a blessing of spirituality. So I have just a little question to ask you, which is, of course, not fair. But if we're already being blessed with the blessing of physicality, and we're being blessed with the blessing of spirituality, which are the first two blessings, so what's left? Here, let's have a look and see. Yisa Hashem ponav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. That God should bless us with shalom. The third blessing, explain the commentaries, is it's not enough just to have the blessing of physicality and spirituality. You've got to know how to utilize them properly. Which means they have to be blended together. In order for us to be able to reach where we need to reach in spiritual terms, we have to have that connection to God where we'll use, like we spoke about yesterday, we're going to use the physicality, elevate it, turn it into a spiritual dimension. But in order to be able to do that, we've got to learn how to do that. God has to bless us with the ability to be able to juggle that one as well. Right? That's what the shalom. Shalom is not just peace. Shalom is a state of tranquility. Shalom is a state of everything being good. Which means that in order to reach that level, we've got to learn how to use the physicality properly. And we've got to learn how to use the spirituality as well. And we've got to learn how to blend them together in order to become who we need to become. Right? The commentaries speak very early on. Already in Sefer Bereshit, right at the very beginning of the creation, when Adam HaRishon is created, that human beings have a duality to them that no other creation has. We are both physical and spiritual. That means we have to utilize both in order to make our connection. And that's what we're being blessed with over here. It's the most fantastic blessing. God is using the Kohanim to bless us. Again, if anybody here is a Kohen, so no one is, right? But maybe you've paid attention in shul in the morning when the Kohanim get up to bless us, that the Shaliach Tzibur says the words Yivarechecha, and then they all repeat Yivarechecha, the Kohanim. And then the person leading the davening says Hashem, and they all say Hashem. And they say V'yichuneka, and they repeat it word by word. One of the reasons it's repeated word by word is that no one should make the mistake of thinking that the blessing is coming from the Kohanim. The blessing is coming from God. God's using the Kohanim as His conduit. The Kohanim become His vehicle to bring that blessing down into the world. That's the most beautiful idea, it really is. God is blessing us with everything. Whatever you could possibly want, God is giving us the ability to reach that potential. And that's why there's a very beautiful custom on Friday nights. Very often parents bless their children. And part of the blessing is this blessing over here, which means the blessing starts off that you bless your boys that they be like Ephraim and Menashe. And then you say, Yivarechecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Yo Hashem panav elecha v'yichuneka, Yisa Hashem panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom, and you use God's name. And for the girls, you bless them that they should be like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, like the matriarchs. Why are we doing that? Because when you stop and think about it for a moment, if the blessing is good enough for God to give to His people, then I guess it's good enough for us to give to our children, no? If the blessing contains everything that you could possibly want inside of it, everything that God could possibly want for us to have is contained inside of that blessing, then that means that when we give it over to our children, everything is contained inside of that as well.
I read something recently about that. You get home from shul and you make the bracha on your children, but the idea being, just as you say, that it's something that you're giving to your children through Hashem, but it's also going from the children back. That it's
I hope so.
Coming to the
blessings in general are rather fascinating things. The word Baruch, which means blessing, is comprised of three letters: Bet, Resh, Chof. Bet in Gematria is 2, Resh in Gematria is 200, and Chof in Gematria is 20. They're all multiples. And the sages explain that the way that a bracha works is really something fantastic. When a person gives a bracha to somebody else, when the person gives a bracha and the person receiving the bracha, when they receive it in the same frame of mind, when they each one is ready to receive and to give, then the bracha bounces back which means that it doubles itself. Right? The 2 becomes 20 and the 20 becomes 200. It becomes something like a snowball effect, right? So when you bless your children, hopefully you're going to set off some kind of a chain reaction over here, and you'll get blessed back in return, even though nobody's saying a word to you. It's interesting that there's a custom when you bless your children that you're supposed to place your hands on their heads. Right? To put your hands on their heads and to make the bracha. And the idea, first of all, there's an idea of making physical contact, that the connection should be there physically and emotionally and spiritually. And secondly, there's also an Indian, it's interesting that when a korban was brought, when a sacrifice was brought to the temple, so that was one of the things that was done as well, that the person would place their hands on top of it. It's almost like a transference, some kind of spiritual transference is taking place over here. It's not just something which is reserved to parents to children. I can remember when I was a kid, whenever we went to visit my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, that he used to bench us, whenever we left, he used to bench us, he used to bless us. In exactly the same way. Not on Shabbos. He used to, whenever we used to go there once a week, twice a week. Whenever we went, whenever we left, he would give us a blessing.
What's a blessing from a father to a daughter at a wedding night?
Oh, that's a little bit longer. It's a slightly longer nusa, but it starts off exactly the same way. If you samei chalim kasoif korocha v'leya, no, you never get rid of daughters.
Oh, I really always said, that doesn't make sense.
So,
but is it the same bracha?
It starts off exactly the same way, and then there's a slightly longer text that comes afterwards.
Why is that?
It's considered to be a very, very masugul dika time, just before the chuppah. The shamayim is open, and it's a very apt time to be giving blessings and to be receiving blessings.
And too, you gotta
yeah, chassan as well. Yeah.
Is what are they special at that time?
Yeah, for sure.
The kala and the chassan.
For sure. What's pshat? There's something fantastic going on over here. This concept of transference, some kind of spiritual transference. When a parent blesses a child, he's not just blessing the child. It's not just him, but it's an accumulation of previous generations that are blessing as well. When a grandfather blesses his grandchildren, it's the same kind of an idea. So I told you, I can remember until today. I was a little kid. I remember, having to come at the end of the visit, having to come and being put underneath my grandfather's hands and like wriggling to try and get away, and he would hold on, and he would make the blessing. So I'll tell you a fascinating thing about my family history. My grandfather was one of 13 siblings. And from my generation, the generation of all the grandchildren, there are exactly 12 from grandchildren. From all those 13 siblings coming down, right, there are exactly 12 of us that are from, and we are all my grandfather's grandchildren. No one else ended up with from grandchildren. Everyone was brought up pretty much the same way. Why is that? So I don't have any doubts that we were given some kind of a protection over there, that there was some kind of what's called schut avot. Something was being transferred across, and it was giving us the ability to hold on to our identity inside of a culture where it wasn't so easy to do that. And yet we did it anyway. So, first of all, I give each and every one of you your own blessing, in Mitzvah Hashem, that when the time comes and you're married and you have your children, that you should be able to give a blessing to your children. It's a very, very beautiful custom, it really is. You know what, whether you're Orthodox or whether you're not Orthodox, the idea of being able to bless your children is something very special, something that you should cherish. Right? And I think it's very special for another reason as well, because I see that it's not so easy to have physical contact with teenage boys. You know, hugs and kisses. They're not very big on hugs and kisses, especially when they're coming from parents. But when it's just understood that on Friday night you're going to get blessed and you're going to get hugged and you're going to get kissed, so then it's okay. It's fine, and they don't get embarrassed, and it allows you to have a little bonding moment with that kid that maybe you wouldn't be able to have otherwise. My grandfather, my mother's father, fought in the First World War. He never really spoke about what he did over there, but we knew that he went off to the trenches. He fought in France. He actually was a member of the Scots Fusiliers at the beginning, and because they lived in Glasgow. And after a while, towards the end of the war, they transferred to the what became the the Jewish Mule Corps, I think, actually, of all names, under somebody called Colonel Patterson. But he was there in the trenches during the First World War. I don't know if you know very much about the First World War history, what was going on in the trenches, but it was something absolutely terrible. The figures, the people that died, were just impossible to fathom. I think, if my memory serves me correct, on the first day of the Battle of the Somme, which was one of the most famous battles in the First World War, I think 65,000 people died. Like, the figures are just, we can't even begin to comprehend. My uncle was once on a train going from London to Cambridge. So he got on the train, he's waiting for the train to leave the station, and a Scottish pastor got onto the train, got onto the carriage and sat down in the same carriage, and a few other people sat down as well. And this fellow had a very broad Scots accent, and he's going around the room. He could have been Jewish, this guy. He's going around the carriage asking people what their names are. So he asked my uncle, "What's your name?" So he told him his name. So when he looks at him, he says to him, and he had this great big booming voice, he says to him, "Tell me," he says, "are you Sam's son?" Our father was called Shmuel, but in the outside world they called him Sam. So he said, "Yeah." So he says in this enormous voice, he says, "Sam," he says, "your father was a maniac." He says, "but because of him, I'm still alive today." And he started to tell the most incredible story. He said they'd been in the same brigade in the First World War. And my grandfather was one of the very, very few Orthodox Jews that were fighting in the Scots Fusiliers. And every day he would daven, and every day he would do whatever he could in order to keep the mitzvahs the best way that he could. And he said one evening they were told that there was going to be an advance. Trench warfare was very barbaric and very primitive. You had trenches on either side of a piece of land, and you had each side trying to get a hold of control of that piece of land, and they would advance every now and then. There'd be an enormous advance, and they would try to push back the enemy as far as they could, and then that piece of land would belong to whichever side won. So they were told that evening there was going to be an advance, early in the morning. Had to get ready. So they got themselves ready, and early in the morning the whistles start blowing, and up they go over the trenches. And unbeknownst to them, the Germans had already started advancing, which means that there's most enormous meeting of German and British troops in the middle of this land over here. And he says that their little group, I don't know how many were in there, maybe 40 or 50 men, they managed to get themselves into a trench that was there in the middle of no man's land. And the Germans had already moved forward, so they were surrounded. And they realized at that point, not very many prisoners of war were taken. It was a lot easier just to kill people. And they began to realize that there wasn't very much they were going to be able to do, because the Germans were surrounding them on all sides, and they were just in this trench, not able to get out. They couldn't go anywhere. And all of a sudden, my grandfather puts on his tefillin, and he gets up to start davening, to start praying. And they all shouted at him, "Jew boy, what are you doing?" And he told them, he says, every single day, the trenches were about shoulder height. If you stood up higher than that, you would be shot. There were snipers all over the place. So people didn't stand up straight inside of the trenches. So he said, every single day, I've been praying. He said he used to pray to the Almighty. That's what he called him, to the non-Jews. He said, I would pray to the Almighty. He said, but crouched over because I couldn't stand up. He says, now? He says, we're all going to die anyway. He said, so I'm going to pray to the Almighty in the way that we're supposed to pray. And his fellow said that he stood up in his tefillin and he started praying. He said he didn't just pray, he said he was screaming out every word, screaming it out at the top of his voice. And he said he got to the end of the prayers, and then he got onto the book of Psalms, and he just started reciting the book of Psalms, screaming them out one after the other. And this fellow, he said, him and another friend, they decided that if anyone's going to stay alive, it's going to be my grandfather. He said, so they crawled over the middle of the war going on. He says they crawled over to where my grandfather was standing, and each one took a hold of one of his legs, and they held on to him like that. They held on to him till the evening. He said in the evening it went quiet, and the troops went back to their various different positions. He said, and they looked around, and they were the only people left alive in that trench. So he said, he looked at my uncle, he says, you see, he says, your father's a maniac. He says, but because of him, I'm still alive. So my uncle had never heard this story before. So he said he was supposed to go and meet somebody in Cambridge. He said he stayed on the train and went straight back to London. And he went to his father, and he says, Daddy, he says, I just met a friend of yours. And he told him his name. And he said to him, Daddy, he told me a story. He says, is it true? And my grandfather said, yeah, it's true. I have no doubt that when my grandfather blessed us as little children, what's being transferred is this incredible blessing, this zchut avot, this incredible accumulation of merit. If somebody is prepared to be able to do that, to put their life on the line in order to be able to pray to God like that, so that's where his from grandchildren are coming from. That's what this blessing is over here. So you know what, I'll give you another blessing. I'll give you a blessing that you should all, Hashem, you should all merit to find your better halves. Looking around the room, you're much better halves. And you should establish beautiful Jewish homes and have beautiful Jewish children, and you should be able to see children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren in Mitzvah Hashem.
Amen.
Good, let's move on. The next part of what we have over here is something really, really strange. The Torah is very succinct. The Torah does not spend a lot of time describing things to us. It doesn't spend a lot of words telling us things. That's part of what makes a written Torah so complicated, because it will throw out a little something, and we're supposed to understand what that means. And that's where the oral Torah comes along in order to pad that out, to give us the information that we need. And yet over here we have the strangest thing. From page 764 until page 772, we are going to have the inauguration sacrifices that were brought by the princes of the tribes, by the Nesiim, and each one is being described in its entirety. So the priest, we'll go through one of them in a minute, but the prince would bring whatever he brought, and that was his inaugural sacrifice. Very nice. The problem is that on the second day, the prince of the tribe brought exactly the same as the person on the first day. And yet the Torah delineates it and gives us all the details one after the other. And then on the third day, exactly the same thing again. And the fourth day, and the fifth day, and the sixth day, until you get to the 12th day. And on the 12th day, you've got the same thing. And then, to cap it all, the Torah then adds it all up. So let's say it says that each prince brought one golden spoon. So let's imagine how many golden spoons are there. Come on, Rabbi, so let's do this together. There are 12 princes, right? From 12 different tribes. And each one brings one spoon. How many are there? Rabbi Moshe, the only one that answered that. You know that. 12. And yet the Torah tells us that there are 12 golden spoons. Why do we need to know that? It adds it all up for us. And that's what makes, I told you on Sunday, that's what makes this week's Parsha the longest Parsha in the whole of the Chumash. 176 verses. It's 176 verses because the vast bulk of the verses are coming with this repetition, exact repetition, word by word, with only the details changing of who the prince is and which tribe he belongs to. We have to try to work it all out. But here, let's go from verse 7, from 766, from verse number 12. We're going to read through one, just to see what's there. They're all the same. Vayi makriv b'yom harishon. So who's going to bring on the first day? Nachshon ben Aminodov lamata Yehuda. Yehuda, the tribe of Judah, is going to bring on the first day. The tribe of Judah, of course, is the one that represents the monarchy, so it's very apt that they should be the ones who are going to bring it. O korbanoi karas kesev achas shloishim u'mea mishkolah. And he's going to bring a silver bowl, which is 130 shekels in weight. Mizrak echad kesef shivim shekel. a silver basin of 70 shekels in weight. Shneim meleim soilet belulam b'shemen lemincha, and each one is filled with fine flour and mixed with oil, ready to make a meal offering. Kaf achat asara zav melea ktoret, a golden ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense. Par echad ben bakar el echad keves echad ben shnato la'olah, one young bull, one ram, one sheep. Se'ir izim echad lechatat, a he-goat, right, a male goat for a korban chatas for a sin offering. Ulezevach hashlamim bakar shnayim eilim chamisha atudim chamisha kvasim b'nei shana chamisha zeh korban nachshon ben Aminadav. What have we got over here? We've got peace offerings, we've got 2 cows, we've got 5 rams, we've got 5 goats, we've got 5 sheep, and that was the offering.
Why does he have to say that this is the offering of Nasso?
Oh, because during each one, we'll see in a minute, we'll see. You're right, it's a question, because it's already said who's bringing it. So why do we need to know at the end that this is the korban of Nachshon ben Aminadav? If you want, you can read through the next one, Natanel ben Tzuah from the tribe of Yisachar. You can read it through, it's exactly the same, nothing's changed. So first of all, I saw once the most beautiful idea from Rabbi Frand. He says like this, he says, you know, the first person brings his offerings, and the second person, they're all bringing the offerings, but nobody worked this out. They didn't work it all out together. They all didn't decide that they're going to bring the same thing, which means that each one is bringing what is the correct thing for their tribe, even though it happens to be exactly the same as the one before him. So he says like this, you know, human nature is such that we want to do better. We want to be better than the person before us, right? He brings an example of, you know, what goes on in communities when it comes to making bar mitzvahs. Right, so the first bar mitzvah that somebody makes, they have chicken and rice. You know, that's okay. The second one, you can't have chicken and rice anymore because, you know, they had chicken and rice, so we need to have chicken and rice and something else, right? And the third one's already, you know, want to, you know, chicken and rice and something else and maybe some ice cream as well. And by the time you get to the, you know, the 8th one, they've already got a sushi bar, right? And by the time you get to the 12th one, you can imagine these people are bankrupting themselves in order to have something better than whoever came before them. That's human nature. Human nature is such that we want to be better than whoever just came before us. That's the world that we live in, right? The world that we live in is that a person can be perfectly happy with what he's got until somebody points out that somebody else has got more than him, and then all of a sudden he's not happy anymore. I saw a study that was done, I can't remember, this is going back a long, long time, maybe into the 80s. It was a sociological, a group of social anthropologists went into the jungles and they found a tribe of natives that had no connection to the modern world. They didn't have electricity, they didn't have running water, they lived in huts. And they interviewed all the women over there from the ages of, can't remember, ages of pretty young, 9 till 20, whatever it was. And 98% of the women that were interviewed over there were happy with the way they looked. Not bad, huh? They then brought in somehow some way that they could watch television for 3 months. So for 3 months you've got all these people watching television, some kind of satellite hookup. I've got no idea how they did it. Maybe they just ran a cable of a few thousand miles, back to wherever it was coming from. And then they came and they interviewed these girls all over again, and only 42% were happy with the way they looked. Society dictates what makes us happy and what doesn't make us happy, right? And one of the simplest ways of being happy is by being bigger or better than the person next to me. So said Rabbi Yisachar Frand like this, the most incredible idea. You know, Natanel ben Tzuar, he's got together what he imagines is the ultimate inaugural sacrifices to bring for the tabernacle. And then what does he see? That the guy before him, Nachshon, is bringing exactly the same thing. What would be the natural reaction to something like that? You know what? I'll throw another couple of cows in over here. You know, we'll throw in another golden spoon and maybe another silver bowl. I'll show him, right? And then by the time day number 3 comes rolling around, what's going to be? Well, you know, 2 golden spoons is not going to be enough, right? So we're going to put in 10. And by the time you get to day number 12, who knows what's going to be being brought? But the problem is, what's the problem? That each prince built his offering, his sacrifice, according to what was spiritually correct for him to bring. And if he brings something else, if he adds on more, that's not called L'Shem Shamayim anymore. You're not doing that for the sake of heaven, you're doing it for the sake of yourself.
He doesn't look at you.
Right? So here he says, you see that the greatness of each prince, that even though Nathanael saw that Nachshon brought exactly the same thing that he was planning on bringing, he didn't change. He didn't decide, you know what, I'm going to bring something bigger. I'm going to show him that I'm better than he is. But he stayed with what was right, and each one stayed with what was right. The most extraordinary Gemara, the Gemara says that when the people used to bring the Bikurim, the first fruits, they would bring them to Jerusalem. How did they bring them? So it says that the poor people would bring their Bikurim, they would bring their fruits on woven reed baskets. And the rich people would bring them in silver and gold containers. And the Kohanim, when they took these fruits from the people, when the poor people brought their offerings, their fruit offerings, they would keep the basket. And the rich people, they would give these containers back. That's the Gemara, somewhat tongue-in-cheek. That's not very fair. That's how the rich get richer, right? It's not fair. You would have thought that if anybody needs to get their baskets back, it should be the poor people. So the Gemara explains no. Because the Kohanim knew that the poor people, what happened? The night before they're supposed to come to Yerushalayim, the farmer would come to his wife and say, you know, sweetheart, I want to do the best that I possibly can to bring these fruits to Yerushalayim, to Jerusalem, and offer them up to God. But I don't have what to bring them on. And the Gemara says she would stay up all night weaving these baskets, l'shem shamayim, only in order to fulfill the mitzvah of being able to bring the first fruits. And the Kohanim, when they received these things, they didn't just take the fruit, they took the basket as well, because the basket was imbued with Kedusha, with a holiness. It was fantastic. He says, but by the rich people, why is he bringing a gold? Why is he bringing a gold container? Last year he brought a silver one, but he saw that his neighbor brought a gold one. So he said, you know what, I'm going to have to bring a gold one next year as well. I can't let him think, you know, that he's got more than I've got. Becomes a competition. That's not the Shem Shemaim. No one's bringing that in order to sanctify God's name. They're bringing it in order to sanctify their own names. So the Kohanim say, we don't want those containers. The cheap wickerwork baskets that were woven by the wives, those we'll take with pleasure, because we know that every thatch was woven, right, with all the right intentions. And by the gold and the silver, there were no real good intentions over there. What we see from over here is the most incredible thing. Each tribe brings its own offering. Its offering is exactly the same. No one's trying to outdo the other one. No one's trying to say, yeah, okay, you know what? He brought a nice offering, but mine is going to be nicer than that. But there's more over here as well. The Kotzker Rebbe, one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, known for his very sharp insights. So he says like this. I think this is a question that we can all relate to in some form or another. Ask the Kotzker Rebbe, where is there room for individuality inside of Judaism? You know, it's a good question, no? So you want to pray. You would imagine prayer is called by the sages avodah shebelev, something which comes out of your heart. I mean, you would imagine that something that comes out of your heart really needs to be your own prayer, no? And yet you open up a siddur and you use the prayers that other people have written. Go into a room, watch 10 people davening mincha together. They look the same, they're saying the same words, they smell the same, right? Where's the individuality over here? Where's my ability to show the uniqueness of my relationship with God? I understand the importance of doing mitzvahs, I really do, but I don't want to do them like that. I want to do them a different way. I understand it's important to have a day of rest, but I prefer to have a day of rest on Tuesday, not on Saturday. Is that okay? So if you say, no, it's not okay, so I'll say, but wait, I want to express my own individuality. And if you say that it is okay, then what are we going to run into? Everybody's going to be keeping Shabbat on a different day. There's going to be no unity whatsoever. So it says the Kotzker Rebbe like this, most incredible idea. You take a look, all these verses, they're repeated over and over and over and over again. The Torah never does this. And yet over here, the Torah finds it important enough to bring each one, instead of saying that this is what the first one brought on the first day, and on the second day he brought the same, and on the third day he brought the same, and on the fourth day he brought the same, it goes through every single one. You know why? Because it's true they were all bringing the same sacrifices, but not one person brought them with the same kavanot. Kavanot are intentions. Not one person brought them with the same intentions as the person next to him. When you've got 10 people praying together in a room, they all look like they're saying the same words and doing the same things, but not one person is praying the same way as the person next to him. Everyone's got their own, what's called kavanah. Everyone has their own intent. Everyone's got their own concentration. This one may be concentrating on this blessing because he needs somebody to get well. This person may be maybe concentrating on this blessing because he needs this, and this one needs that, and this one needs the other, and each one's got their own personal take on what they're doing. So it's the most incredible idea, it really is. It's true we're being told what to do. But by being told what to do, instead of having to concentrate on what to do, now we can concentrate on how we're going to do it. You hear the idea? I don't have to worry now about what I'm going to say when I pray to God. Someone's taking care of that already. The men of the Great Assembly, the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, they compiled the Siddur pretty much the way that we have it today. Well over 2,000 years ago. Towards the right at the time of the destruction of the first temple, so we're about 2,400 and something years. Because what was going on up until then, prayer was a very spontaneous thing. There were very few prayers that were part of the liturgy. Prayer was you were overcome with a desire to speak to God, so you spoke to God. You composed your own prayer. Towards the end of the first temple period, what was going on? The spiritual level of the Jewish people was dropping radically, and people weren't praying. So along came the men of the Great Assembly, and they said like this, it's very simple. They're saying, Rabbi, say you're mistaken. You think that it's your choice whether you can pray or not. It's not. God wants you to pray. That's obligatory. So we're going to tell you how to pray, and then you can work out what kind of kavanah you want to add into the prayers that you're giving. That's what's so beautiful about it. We become like a team with all the individuals inside coming together in order to turn it into something far greater than it would be otherwise. You know, quite a few years ago I was back in London, and I don't know very much about football, English football. What can I tell you? I'm revealing my innermost sins to you right now, but I never really followed football. But you couldn't not follow it. There was somebody called David Beckham, who was, considered to be the best player in the world, was transferring from Manchester United to a Spanish team. And you know what happens? That the first thing after the transfer takes place is that they all go out, and the whole team now has their photo taken in their football kit, right? And then that was on the front pages of every single newspaper in England, was this team with David Beckham over there. I'll tell you the truth, I don't know what David Beckham looks like. I wouldn't have been able to identify him over there. But there's a reason for that, not just because I don't know what he looks like, but because everybody looks the same. You get a group of people into a uniform, right? They look the same. Everybody here knows that in a team, everybody is wearing the same clothing, but everybody's got their own position. Which is a team that plays well together is a team that allows each individual to take the rest of the team into account. Right? We all know that. If you've ever had the misfortune of playing a game a team game with somebody who thinks that he can do everything, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you're that person, I apologize for what I'm about to say, but you can't win a game with somebody like that. He won't pass to anybody. He won't do anything. He thinks he can do everything by himself. You're completely superfluous. You just stand around doing nothing, right? A team, a cohesive unit, is where each individual, how's this for a paradox? Each individual negates a part of their own individuality in order to be able to blend into the whole. Which is when you play on a team, you know that you've got your position. If you move out of your position, you're going to mess everybody else up. Which means that you've got to do what you need to do in order for everyone else to be able to do what they need to do. You've all got to work in tandem together. That's really what the Kotzker Rebbe is saying. The Kotzker Rebbe is saying like this, that we're all members of the team, the Jewish team. We're part of God's first 11, right? That's who we are. In order to be able to do that, we have to fit in. We have to play according to God's rules, and we'll do what God wants us to do. But each person has to utilize their maximum individuality inside of being a part of that team. That's what all these princes over here are coming to teach us. And that's why at the end of the Parsha, what does the Torah do? The Torah then adds it all up and tells us there are 12 of these, and there were 12 of those, and there were 24 of these. Why would that be? Because you need to know that it wasn't 12 individual offerings that were being brought over here. But when everybody comes together and plays as a team, then what happens now? They all become connected. It becomes one large unit, which is all being utilized over here for Avodat Hashem.
Which is really Achdus.
Achdus, yeah. It's interesting. You know, the Chidush Arim says like this, that it says that, interestingly enough, they brought wagons, and they brought 6 wagons, and each 2 Nasiim shared the wagons. And the Chidush Arim, the first Ger Rebbe, says the reason for that is to teach that everyone's connected. In order for us to be able to reach where we need to reach, even as individuals, in order for us to reach our maximum individuality, we have to work within the team. We've got to work with inside of everybody else.
And this also where we learn that we shouldn't, I shouldn't say, oh, look, I envy him because he's got more cars than I do. Is this part of it?
I think so, yeah. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave you what you need, and if we stop looking what other people have and we look at what we've got,
Them, I don't think we're looking at each
other. No. And when they saw each prince saw what the prince before him was bringing, and he was happy for that prince, even though it was exactly the same as his. He was happy for him because that encapsulated everything that particular tribe stood for, just with different kavanot, each one with their own kavanot. There's a commentary on the very famous midrash called the Midrash Rabbah. Midrash Rabbah, there's a commentary called the Tiferes Tzion. Tiferes Tzion has got 2 volumes worth of commentary on all of these inaugural sacrifices. 2 volumes. Explaining like this and like that and like the other, why this one is, why he brought for his tribe what it meant and how it fits in and what it was referring to, what its symbolism was, and then he moves on to the next tribe and he brings all different kinds of symbolisms from exactly the same things. Because at the end of the day, we belong to each other and we're all individuals. Again, I think it's something to think about. Next time you're standing in a room and you're praying together with everybody else, maybe it's something to think about, this idea of prayer offering you the ability to express yourself with a maximum individuality inside of the words that the men of the Great Assembly have given us to pray. It's got a very beautiful dimension to it. It really has. The idea to be able to express yourself, the inner dimension of who you are, and connect together with God in the best possible way that you can. And you don't have to worry about what to say. It's all been taken care of. All you've got to worry about is what your kavanah is, what your intent is.